Today on CityCast Chicago, Mayor Johnson plans to veto one fair wage pause. The city clears yet another encampment, and when one restaurant week ends, another begins. It's Friday, March 20th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. I am joined by some amazing voices on today's episode. From the Chicago Reader, Katie Prout. Welcome back to CityCast Chicago, my friend.
Always a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
We appreciate you making time. Also from the Chicago Tribune, Jake Sheridan. Thank you for joining us again.
Of course, it's always fun.
If this is your first episode of the week, welcome back to the podcast. We appreciate you making time to listen as well. Whether you are just waking up in the bathroom, brushing your teeth, we are automatically playing somewhere in your house in the middle of the day and you're not even there. Whatever the case may be, we appreciate you showing up. And like every Friday, we brought in these amazing reporters to look back on some of the biggest stories happening in our week. And I want to start here. While Election Day was going on, we were heading to the booth. City Council was preparing to take a really important vote, the damn selves. And they ultimately voted on Wednesday to freeze the one fair wage ordinance that they themselves passed a few years ago. This ordinance is supposed to gradually phase out the subminimum wage for tipped workers. Jake, can you remind people its timeline and why is this something that they were taking up right now at this moment?
Yeah, so this ordinance was passed, and it was passed decisively, 36 votes in 2023. And what it does basically is, so there's a subminimum wage. There's a lot of people who work restaurant industry jobs in the city know you can make $9, and if you don't get enough tips to bring you up to the city's minimum wage, let's call it now $16, then the restaurant will pay that gap. But the tips don't get you above 16, they just get you to 16 in that subminimum wage, right? So that's being phased out, gradually raised up to the city's normal minimum wage by 2028. We're 2 years in these gradual raises, but now a city council majority wants to freeze that. They want to halt the increases because they say it's harming restaurants across the city.
So this is an ordinance that's about fair wages. This is about tipped workers who are largely Black women, Black and brown workers. These are individuals who, many of which were excited to see this wage slowly increase over the next now it would have been, 2 or 3 more years to go.
And that raise hits in July. I mean, I think a lot of people are planning their lives around this, right? It's not a small thing to expect to get a $2 raise every year. That would be a big deal. It is a big deal for me when it happens for us in our union contract, right? And you're absolutely right. That's something that the folks in the political campaign, the national political campaign that's supporting this one fair wage, have said over and over again with their local leaders that this is something that supports Black people, Latino people, and women in the restaurant industry. But, it seems like what happened here is aldermen noticed that the election was coming up. This was something that was only signaled as coming down the pipe last week. There could have been more debate on this. Some in the council yesterday said there should have been more debate on this as it was coming up for a vote. They asked for it to be stalled and considered more. But nonetheless, the folks who support it, who support freezing the pay increases, they went ahead with their vote and they won the vote, but they won the battle. They didn't win the war. The mayor pretty quickly issued a veto on this, and he made a lot of those same points. He said that, he stands with working people and working people of color, and that he thinks that he described this as an effort to pad the profits of wealthier folks at the expense of the working class.
Yeah, the word of the day during this election season was affordability, right? Everything is going up. Groceries is going up. Healthcare is going up. Access to transportation is going up. Childcare is going up. So for the city council, which again, overwhelmingly passed this ordinance a few years ago, to come out and say, well, this moment is pitting restaurants against workers, and we are going to side with the restaurant industry. And I understand that we talk about everything getting more expensive, and that means food inside the restaurant. I understand that the supply chain has impacted restaurants' ability to bring in big materials. I understand that recent surveys have said that, restaurants have passed these costs off to the customer via the menu, or, passed the costs off by cutting hours for workers. workers for pausing hiring new workers. But how is the answer to continue to stagnate the wages of workers who we know are having some of the hardest times right now? So the idea that city council so quickly listened to the restaurant lobbyists, and yes, there are small business owners who are saying this has been difficult to manage. But again, when so much is more expensive right now, the idea that we're going to spend our energy and our time not trying to, push back against the tariffs from the federal government, right? The fact that we're going to go for the easiest target on the board, which is the wages of our workers, and use the threat that we can't hire people. We're going to have to fire people. We're going to have to keep passing these costs off. It feels so disingenuous when we're having this sort of broad conversation about the effectiveness of the one fair wage ordinance.
You make an interesting point there. You want to talk about gas prices going up, about rent going up, about food costs going up. Those are things that affect people who work too. Those aren't just things that affect restaurants. And that's a point that Reagan Draper, who's one of the main organizers in the city for One Fair Wage, made at a presser yesterday. And you pointed out another thing that I heard yesterday, which is, there's all this talk from all these politicians about affordability and about all these buzzwords. But, push came to shove yesterday. And, the mayor made the argument that the city council also had a ordinance honoring the Reverend Jesse Jackson yesterday. And, a couple dozen aldermen got up to speak. And the mayor afterwards, after this vote, made the point that he believes these aldermen are being sort of facetious when they go and they praise this man who pushed for workers' rights, who pushed for representation and fair pay and inclusion for Black people, for other people of color, and then they go and vote like this. So that was the argument that the mayor made after the vote.
And I will say, I think the mayor's last veto really, at least on first glance, speak to some of the, not only the challenges and the balances the mayor's trying to strike, but also some of the nuance and the differences in these conversations. Because, city council is arguing this is about small businesses. This is about this industry, right? But when the hemp ban was up, that was the mayor's justification for like moving a little bit slower, to think about the small businesses who would be impacted by the sort of full sale ban of hemp products across the city. And so now the mayor is thinking more in line with workers. And so I actually appreciate how these vetoes show that the mayor is really taking each of these conversations a case by case basis. He's not moving with this sort of blanket rhetoric around everything I do is to protect small business. He's like, sometimes it is better to think maybe business first, whether you disagree or agree. And here he's saying this claim that restaurants would be hurt, that workers would be fired or have their hours cut. We already knew this. We discussed this during the debate and still decided that workers' wages, which were so stagnant, needed to go up. And so I'm really confused at how we've decided to switch course so quickly.
Yeah. One thing I heard from one alderman who I asked who flipped, Derek Curtis in the South Side, he pinned it on being in a border ward where restaurants can kind of just bump over and be in another town. He was in a border ward before, so that answer didn't make a lot of sense to me. When I talked to him, he repeated a lot of the same things I heard at a presser 20 minutes earlier that was run by the Illinois Restaurant Association. And, I also want to point out, that there is no doubt, I think, that restaurants are struggling. It's a notoriously hard industry, and it's a tough time, no doubt. To that point, though, also, the mayor's presented data that would suggest the restaurant industry is seeing fewer closures and more openings. They're saying the exact opposite. It's kind of hard to make sense of that because everyone's sort of pointing to different data pools, and it's hard to figure out which one's the best one. But
we understand it's a precarious industry. We recently sat down with Kevin Pang, the newest food guy over at NBC, a longtime food writer in the city. And his suggestion and recommendation for myself as a consumer was to assume everyone is struggling. Every one of your favorite restaurants, every bar that you visit is struggling. But the idea that struggle needs to be passed off onto the people who are legitimately holding this business up, to pass it off to the most vulnerable person in your workplace. Yeah, I can't square that. Again, I understand everyone is struggling here, but I can't square that the solution is to pay people who have been historically underpaid to just like to stop the increases. As you point out, Jake, they've been planning their lives around. That it feels like such a short-sighted and cruel move ultimately.
There was an interesting description that one of the activists gave yesterday. One of the activists said, a restaurant without its workers is just an empty room.
With slowly spoiling food. Access Contemporary Music's Sound of Silent Film Festival is now in its 21st year. And I already know what you're thinking. Kobe, this is an audio medium, and that sound a bit like an oxymoron. Doesn't a silent film festival just sound like this? But here's the thing. This festival features newly composed musical scores performed live, so it's movies and a concert. These silent films were selected from more than 100 submissions to an international call, and they span comedy, drama, experimental, and beyond. Plus, they short. Each one is only about 2 to 15 minutes long. And to top it all off, the festival is at none other than the Music Box Theater, one of my favorite spots in the city and a beautiful setting for this kind of event. The Sound of Silent Film Festival is happening Wednesday, April 8th at 7:30 p.m. Tickets are available at acmusic.org. During the coldest week of the month and amidst rolling rain and snow showers, the city cleared yet another encampment across the city, this time at Legion Park in West Ridge on Election Day morning. Katie, can you talk about how long was this in the works?
Yeah, and before that, I want to go back to something that we were just talking about.
For sure, my apologies.
No. I was just thinking about one of the first times I went down to Lower Wacker and met people who lived in an encampment, so those people who are unhoused. I met someone who worked in a bar in River North, right? And so you're talking about the idea that people who are unhoused, people that are living in poverty, or people that are working class, living in apartments, struggling, like really, 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 really depend on these wages being increased. And like you were talking about, like Jake was talking about, you plan ahead as much as you can, knowing like, okay, I'm going to have this raise. Maybe that'll help me with childcare. Maybe that'll help me with rent. Maybe that'll help me get a hotel for a night. And then to take that away is like pretty devastating. And I bring that up as we start to talk about Legion Park because I see a lot of this as really connected. I want to bring that kind of together as we're switching into here because, yeah, this Legion Park sweep, it's not the only sweep that's happened in the city over the last few years. It's gotten a lot of attention this week and in the weeks leading up for a few reasons. So this has been in the works since last fall. I think that is when the city put out a statement saying that there would be a closure in Legion Park sometime in the first quarter. I believe that the FSS started putting up signs letting folks know that lived in the park that closure would happen on March 17th in January. And I started visiting regularly in February and saw those signs up. And so one of the things that the park district will say when it comes to, is this a sweep or is it a closure? You'll see I kind of use both words. Carlos Ramirez Rosa is the current park superintendent. He is adamant that the parks district does not engage in encampment sweeps. He says sweeps are inhumane and they are what happens when people don't get notification. Because there has been notification, that means that it's a closure. Now, this language, I guess, matters for the people up top very much, but for the people on the bottom who are experiencing it, they're calling it a sweep and they're calling it an eviction because the result is they're still forced by police officers with guns. They're not. I did not see any guns pointed. I want to be clear, but you're bringing police officers to make sure that people leave their tents in a below 32-degree day. Those tents are often already winterized as best they can be to sustain and help people survive through those cold temperatures. And not everyone had another place to go that night, whether a temporary shelter or a permanent sort of house or apartment.
Yeah, the city's claims are, to your point, that they put up notification and that they brought resource workers out here to try to connect people with temporary housing. But were the people currently living in Legion Park, were they all able to move into this new housing before this sweep, closure, raid operation took place?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's something called accelerated moving events that are a tool used by the city to help get folks kind of like further along in the housing process, right? During an accelerated moving event or an AME, you've got social workers on site. They already have relationships with people in an encampment or people nearby that they can sort of like, hey, you're on this list, come to this meeting in a park field house. We're going to help you apply for apartments. We're going to connect you, like, do you need help getting your social security card? It's supposed to like sort of push them along further in the process. That process can end that day with people being connected to an apartment. It also cannot, because it's a mix of public and private housing options, and it's competitive market just like the rest of us. So there was one woman who's become a prominent spokesperson for the park residents. She goes by Tita Carmen. Tita uses a wheelchair. She's physically disabled and chronically ill in some significant ways. And she and her partner, Oscar, have a dog named Princess that they adore very much. And Oscar is Tita's primary caregiver, like helps bathe her, like really intimate care. And she and he were on a housing list. They went to the AME. And then a few days before the sweep, she was told that the housing that the city would be providing her with was in a building where she would be in one small room to herself. Oscar would be in an entirely different room to himself, and they could not bring their dog. Tita cannot walk. And so to separate her from her partner, her fiance, who is also, again, her primary caregiver, is just an unlivable option from jump, right? And, I see language from the city, like we've been offering bridge housing, which they call, it can look like temporary shelters, and respect individuals' rights to choose not to take it, which is an interesting way of saying we offered someone shelter that does not meet their needs. People want to live somewhere. They want to live somewhere safe. They want to live somewhere warm. They want to live somewhere comfortable. They want to live somewhere they want to live. And so when they're telling you, I can't live here because like I love my cat and I don't want to part with my cat, and then politicians or house neighbors think that's like a silly reason, that's just so dehumanizing. But it also is like, folks want to work with you. They are telling you what they need. If you believe them, you can get somewhere with that. And the truth is, we don't have a lot of housing that can meet everyone's needs. We're at a like wild affordable housing shortage. And so not even if there is a shelter available or an apartment available, it doesn't mean that it's going to be sufficient for someone. And that's okay. So residents in this park were organizing like a tenants union. And they provided the city with an alternative proposal where they were like, hey, we will take fire safety lessons, agree to like live within certain distance from neighbors' houses.
Because people were complaining that
because there's a concern about fire. People complain about the dogs, although I will say, as my journalistic eyes, I was there interviewing folks. Every dog at the encampment was on a leash, and a woman came out of her house and took her 5 unleashed dogs for a walk, and they came and started like trying to fight with the dogs. But that woman, no one is calling for her to get evicted from her home. No one is saying that entire street of house people because of that woman and her 5 dogs should be evicted because they're a danger, right? So the residents were trying to put forth this proposal to work with the city to come to a workable solution that would allow them to stay in this park until they got housing that works. They want that. But what doesn't help is being told to move, losing their belongings, losing those connections, and not having anywhere else to go. And the city didn't respond until a few days beforehand. They said that this was going forward anyway. And the night of the sweep, some people moved to just different city parks, just so like there's going to be another problem shortly, more neighbors, more politicians, more folks upset about their presence, or they went into a church basement. But the church can only shelter them for so many days according to city law. So it's really, yes, I want to be clear that like some people did get housing. Some people did end up in a shelter that works for them. Yeah. That's true, and that should not be ignored.
And some people had all of their
but the lives of these other people
completely trashed and thrown away. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Exactly. Like some people get their, I watch stuff get thrown away. That's just like, it's just, if somebody came and did that to me, I'd be devastated, and people are telling you what they need over and over and over again. And I don't think that someone should have to be perfect in order for their voice to be heard.
You said something interesting about where they're moving and sometimes to different parks. There's been like a ton of different instances like this in this part of town in the last 2 years, right? Gompers Park, Legion.
Yes.
And I feel
Eugene Field. It's constant. So I interviewed people that have been living in that area for 4, 5, 6 years in various parts of the River Channel, who are just simply being moved from one spot to another, and they'll get housing. I spoke with one woman who used to be, as a teenager, involved in a lot of gang activity. She no longer is, but she's like, it's not safe for me to live anywhere south of like Addison. And she keeps getting offered housing in Humboldt Park. She's like, I cannot be in Humboldt Park. Like, I cannot live there. It is not safe for me. So yeah, that's an example of someone wanting housing. And it's not happening.
This has been like the biggest focus for Alderwoman Sam Nugent in the last 2 years, I think, and I've been talking with her. And it's interesting, she's actually the same alder who was leading the charge on overturning and freezing one fair wage yesterday.
Residents at the park asked, Alder Nugent to come and meet with them, and she never did. I will say Representative Lindsay LaPointe did and was listening and talking with them about housing, and that's a particular interest of hers. But there was, some residents from the park went with advocates to City Hall to present this alternative proposal. They went to the City Council meeting in February, and they did not get a city response. And I emailed and then emailed and then emailed again and finally got something, a few days beforehand. But, there's sort of you'll hear sometimes about like tiny homes, which are like these like very small little sheds that might pop up on vacant land, financed by like a nonprofit. And we can house people there. We can do this or we can do that. But sometimes what I hear from advocates, what I hear from housing workers, what I hear from people themselves, that the solutions are a lot less flashy or like TED Talky, and more just like let people stay where they're at as safely as possible, help them be safe until they get where they need to go. Yeah. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that.
As the dust settles on primary day, one of the big questions on people's minds is how much did the millions and millions that flowed into these races from out of state, from super PACs, from crypto and AI funders, from APAC, how much influence did that have on our elections? Jake, do we have any, major conclusions a couple days out?
Yeah, I'm gonna give an answer that you probably won't hear very often from journalists. I don't really know. I think it's really hard to make sense of what happened in this election. But I do think that there are a couple of things that we can see and identify. I think that we can see that money played a hugely massive role, and where that led to wins, like the APAC-backed candidates winning in the 2nd District, Donna Miller, and in the 8th District, Melissa Bean. It was a huge part of their win. Donna Miller does not have that name recognition without $6 million plus in APAC money behind her. Yep. If you were driving, you saw those Go Donna Go billboards. If you were on your phone or watching TV, you saw those commercials. But also, they had candidates lose. In the 7th District, the 9th District, Daniel Biss wins, LaShawn Ford wins. LaShawn Ford faced a huge amount of opposition spending from Fairshake, from the cryptocurrency PAC. And I think all of that together, where it worked for the big spenders, for the special interests, yeah, it played a huge role. Where it didn't work, it created an uphill battle. There's no doubt. But I was talking yesterday with, I don't know if y'all saw the video of some Sunrise Movement people, and if not now, organizers and protesters getting arrested outside the AIPAC office, downtown office building. I was talking with one of them. Her name is Alex Nelson. And, she told me that what she thinks one thing to learn from this is that there's a foothold for community organizations. They have a big advantage. They don't have the money that AIPAC has. They don't have the money that the cryptocurrency industry has, but they can show up. They could show up during Midway Blitz and blow a whistle on a street corner, and they can go and visit synagogues, and they can, just kind of organize and build trust with people over time. And that gives them leverage to, take that trust and try to convince people and have more people convincing more people about who to vote for and what to push for in an election in the future. So, she said basically that that's the foothold they have until campaign finance laws change. Yeah. Certainly doesn't look like that's coming down the pipeline anytime soon. But, and just to reiterate, this is like such an unprecedented amount of spending. Like we talk about money in politics all the time. I spent a huge amount of time counting up all the numbers and PAC spending and contributions from this election, but also all the elections back to 2012 in the last couple of weeks. And like if you put it in a graph, all the competitive Democratic primaries for Congress in Chicago in the last 16 years, we are so far and above all the old records now. Each of the big four races this time around would be not just like record setting, but record smashing in terms of the money involved when you add up contributions and outside group spending. So, not a ton of clear takeaways. It played a huge role. At the very least, it created an uphill battle for folks who won. But the money was identified by a lot of people, I think. And yeah.
Yeah. I think one thing I was grateful for is once you looked into the reporting to see all of the different ways these corporations, these lobbying groups tried to break up the money, tried to hide the money, tried to create super PACs that seemed pretty innocuous, like Black women in Congress, things like that.
Affordable Chicago Now, Election Chicago.
Yeah. I appreciate how much work journalists like yourself put into tracking down those various pots of money, and also how much criticism was being leveled by everyday Chicagoans questioning, where's this spending coming from? How connected is your campaign? But how much are you beholden to the agenda of these big spenders? And again, I don't think that's going to have a huge impact on campaign finance law anytime soon. I think Citizens United is going to whoop our ass for decades to come. But I do think if this primary season was any indicator, people are getting more hip to how much political money is maneuvering through our local races, and are starting to call politicians on it a little bit more. Again, it may be recency bias, but 10 years ago, I don't know if people were criticizing AIPAC spending the way they are now. I know the money has shot up.
They do now, though. I mean, that's like Governor Pritzker talks about leaving. He was on the board of AIPAC and he left it. He says because they started spending so much in politics. So it is something. It is. You're right. You're absolutely right that this is something that I think journalists like the folks at BEZ, Mariah Waffle, and them, they did such an amazing job of piecing this all together. But also, it's a new thing. You're totally right that this is going to become more of a thing. I'm really interested in seeing how this is going to play out in 11 months now in the next Chicago election.
Even the school board elections, I'm interested to see how much money flows in. We got a taste of it during the hybrid election. We were only picking 10 people. Now that the entire board and the president will be, left up to our control, left up to our voting, I imagine that those campaign dollars are going up, that media spending is going to go up. And so I'm hopeful for a couple of weeks where my mailbox isn't flooded, but I'm not holding my breath. I feel like we're going to be right back in this cycle very, very quickly.
It is interesting, just to echo something you said, Jacoby. I do feel like I've been having more conversations, in part because of the terrific reporting that's been done. But people just seem like they're getting a little more savvy, or a little more, folks that aren't necessarily always super political. They got all these flyers and they just don't pass the smell test. They'll have the right keywords and phrases, Black women progressives for this, or, I don't know, very trying to take like an identity and a this and a that and just sound specific enough while also being kind of bland. And it just, folks are like, I don't know who that is. Why would they be saying this about this candidate? I thought this candidate, as far as I know, seems like good on XYZ policies. And so I am, it might be, I don't know if we all got to have hope in these days and times. And one of my hopes is that, like, yeah, folks are reading local news more, and folks are also just like more, even though there's so much every day that can overwhelm us and exhaust us, paying attention and rightly using their own critical thinking skills and being like, I don't think so. I don't know who these people are.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Yeah.
These names are so crazy. I want to show you guys. This is the Elect Chicago Woman website. And it's basically just this. There's the most like stock photo ass.
Yes.
It's a little flexing looking out on the horizon. It's just
crazy.
And again, if I'm just like passing through, I'm like, I support this. I love this idea. Again, the fact that Juliana Stratton is only so much super PAC money was coming in to oppose her. And the flyer, I don't even know who it wanted me to vote for. It was just her face on like some Scrooge McDuck coins. And I was like, I don't even know what, like, I understand what you're telling me, but what do you want me to do? Are you just saying don't vote for her and vote for anybody else? It was the PAC media was getting out of hand towards the end.
It was like a lot of blatant lying, right? Like there was the One PAC Chicago Progressive Partnership attacking Junaid Ahmed and Katabu Ghazaleh. Like them or not, those are progressives. And like the idea, there was another attack on Robert Peters in the 2nd district, that he was like controlled by corporate interests. You don't have to like Robert Peters. You can think that his progressive policies are awful. But the idea that he's like a corporate
shell, wild. Have you ever sat down and talked with that man? You ever been in with any one of his events?
It's a lie. And that's like, lying is bad. Katie, I'm curious, like, if you had, how many AMEs do you think could $65 million pay for?
I mean, this is what I'm thinking about listening to, everyone talk. I'm trying to find out, and I'm in FOIA purgatory right now of just like, how much does it cost the city to do these encampment evictions? But yeah, I don't know. I got a lot of questions and I'm trying to answer, and we'll see what happens.
We are going to drop links to all of Jake and Katie's reporting in our show notes, so make sure you are headed there to follow along. We end every single episode of CityCast Chicago, no matter how sad it gets us, the exact same way, and that is with some good news. Katie, what's your good news for us today?
All right, I'm going to tell you my good news. I'm going to try not to get emotional, but I'm going to become a homeowner. We're talking about how expensive everything is, how I report on unhoused folks, and I am very aware of like my luck and my privilege. I also come from a background with like pretty significant economic precarity. And my parents lost their house when I was a teenager. It was really only through family and friend support that we didn't end up even more precarity after that. And I am able to get a condo with my spouse in part because of, like we've been saving, but also from like family and friend support. And I want to be very transparent about that because, love the reader, love journalism, don't make enough to do it on my own. And childcare, I have a baby, it's really expensive. So starting in May, I'm going to become a South Sider.
Come on, I was going to ask what neighborhood.
Stoked, we're going to Kenwood.
Come on.
Yeah, so I'm really pumped. That's my good news.
No, I am so happy for you and your family. We've been talking for 5 years on this podcast. And so to see this amount of joy in your face and this, like, I am so happy for you and your family. Congratulations, Katie.
Thank you. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Over to my boy, Jake. What is your good news for us today?
Yeah. It was my birthday recently, and
happy belated.
I have a birthday party coming up, and I have a magician coming.
Oh my God. Like, which magician?
Incredible.
So he's a friend of a friend. I've seen him before. He's so sick. He's so good. He's like more of a mentalist kind of thing, He's got memory tricks. He can like get into people's phones. He just can guess people's phone passwords, which is crazy.
That scares me.
So yeah,
very much.
Blow the minds of my friends. It's gonna be really fun.
Oh my God. Congratulations. Cool. Like I love the whimsy. I feel like that's a word I've seen a whole bunch recently online, and I love the whimsy for you. Shout out to bringing a little bit of magic to the party. I am going to close us out. My good news, as I alluded to up top, is related to restaurant weeks. Obviously, with it being unpredictable weather, seeing the Chicago Restaurant Week turn into Black Restaurant Week, turn into Andersonville Restaurant Week. Now, Westtown Restaurant Week is kicking off this weekend and is going all week long. And some of my favorite new restaurants in the city, or new to me, are on this list, like Brasero, Una More. And so if you haven't found your way over to Chicago Ave to try out some of these, this is your time to get some good deals. And so I'm going to drop a link in the show notes. I want to give an absolute huge thank you to our guest today. Thank you so much for making time. From the Chicago Reader, Katie Prout, always good to see you. And again, congratulations.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
And from the Chicago Tribune, Jake Sheridan, happy birthday, my friend.
Hey, thank you.
Before we get out of here, I just want to give a huge thank you to every single person who makes this podcast and newsletter possible, including our executive producer, Simone Alisea, our newsletter editor, Emmy Mack, our producer, Michelle Navarro, our social media manager, Rick Homuth, post-production by Jesse Weiser, roving producer this week, Elizabeth Kama. The music we all love is from Sam Thousand, All the Kimonos, and Mark Greenberg from the Mayfair Workshop. Please share the podcast with your friends and family. We're going to be back bright and early on Monday. We'll talk to you then. Peace. Bro, everybody look happy when they got some big ass scissors. I will look happy with some big ass scissors.